Welcome to a quick sharp review of the Fire Force Omnibus Complete series by Atsushi Okubo. I'm going to be talking a bit about the physical release, about the story itself, and then lastly what music I'd recommend listening to when reading it. So first of all, we'll just look at this nice artwork on the running spine. Picture that sort of connects all of these different characters. You can see that it's a bit not exact in terms of where this lines up, this picture. Which makes it have not as nice an effect as, say, the Vagabond omnibuses do, which is probably the best one of this type of thing that I've seen. But it is still nice to see on the shelf, particularly when you get to know some of these characters, just to see them all together. I think is pretty cool. One other thing that in person, more so than on a video, is that because the way that these books are structured, you can see that the spine starts to come in a little bit here on these sides, so that when two of them are next to each other, you've got this big gap in the middle, which again doesn't happen on the Vagabond ones, which makes the picture look more complete and more together than these do. I still think these are nice and they look cool, but yeah, that's a bit of a wasted opportunity. I think it could have been much cleaner, much more nicely put together. So in terms of the omnibuses, we've got 12 omnibuses in total. These, the 1 to 10, have 3 in one, so 3 volumes in one, and then each of these have 2 in one. So I mean, what else could they do with a 34 volume series than to do something like this? I think it works fine rather than make this one giant volume and give you more bang for your buck. These ones are actually a bit nicer, I think, in terms of the whole structure. Because if we go back and we look even at Fire Force 1, how big these are means that the spine does bend quite a bit when we're opening this, which is a bit of a shame. Compare that to the later volumes here. Not nearly as much. So these are a bit easier to read, I guess, and a bit more future-proof in terms of protecting them. In terms of artwork that we've got 3 volumes in here, so we've got cover art from each of those 3 volumes there in varying sort of orders, depending on what's going on in the book. And then same thing on the back here of these last 2. We've got 1 and 2 on the back. In terms of stuff inside it, there are no colour pages in any of these. It's just something to be in mind. This probably was a colour page in the original. This was as well, just all in black and white. It is what it is. They do have like little profiles on some of the characters, and they do have in between the chapters. If I can find, in between the volumes, they have catch up on who's who, which I think is always good, especially in a series like this where there are tons of characters and hard to keep track of. I also like, and this is probably the best example of this, translation notes. So there are a lot of puns that are in Japanese in this series, and the translators really went out of their way to come up with English alternatives for some of the phrases that are used to make it to have the same effect. I think it's an interesting way of doing it, and they're fairly comprehensive in terms of explaining what the original joke was and why they changed it to this to try to get a similar effect. I think it's really cool for them to go ahead and do that. Page quality is fairly good, I think, in terms of bleed through. If you look through there, not a whole ton on a fairly white page. This is a pretty nice release, apart from the thickness of the volumes and the bending of the spine there. Compare it to something like the One Piece 3-in-1s, where, I mean, the One Piece ones are the size of just like a normal manga. The Fire Force ones are a bit bigger. I'm not actually sure. I don't think that the actual Fire Force volumes are that tall. They might be though, because I buy these for about 25 to 30 Australian dollars. Each volume of Fire Force by itself is about $20. So these are really good value for money. If you want to collect this series, you're probably going to get all of it at half the price you would with singles. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's pretty good. I mean, it's obviously investment if you like the series and wanting to pick up every volume of it. But even just comparing with the One Piece 3-in-1s here, at the shocking amount of bleed through that you get there, and you can see this is sort of yellowish paper. Oh, even there, messy. Compare that to Fire Force, nice whiter paper, and you can't really see through any of those things. So the story, Fire Force, starts off as a fairly typical shonen battle manga about firefighters who are fighting like a plague of spontaneous human combustion where people become these fiery devils. All of the powers are fire-based and heat temperature based, which makes for really interesting scenarios, and it's always interesting to see how the mangaka is able to come up with different powers that feel unique in this universe, and that's always cool because he's sort of limited himself into making it all sort of heat and temperature based. So some really interesting stuff happened there. There's this central mystery around the world and a lot of the world building and the powers that be, which are revealed throughout it, which I really liked. And then at some point, this series just gets completely bizarre in terms of what it's trying to say. And I think it may put some people off who are just enjoying the typical shonen battle manga side of it. For me, I thought it was incredibly interesting for an author and artist to have certain ideas, and he's obviously got clout enough to be able to do what he wants, coming off the back of Soul Eater, which was quite successful. And this series has a number of references to Soul Eater. I won't say anything more than that. To be able to put some really wild meta ideas into this series and finish it out on their own terms, it's impressive just from an artistic point of view. And you see in between the chapters how more of his own personal style that isn't very typical shonen manga style, that you feel like he wants to draw in his style more, it starts to come out more and more until it starts bleeding into the actual story itself. The ending, I felt was pretty satisfying. There were some confusing bits, and again, it gets a bit bonkers. But if you want, your shonen mangas spiced up a bit, I think this is a pretty good one. It does all the shonen manga stuff really well, and it has some very interesting ideas towards the end. And yeah, I don't really want to go into it any more detail than that because I think it will just be going into spoiler territory. But yeah, I can't talk about it. Anyway, I would recommend listening to, I've made a shonen manga playlist that has a lot of the Fire Force music from the anime, which is pretty spectacular. It's also got some other stuff, and it fits this series really well. You just sort of cycle around to whatever the mood is of the current scene. If that's a somber scene, there's tracks for that. If it's an action-packed scene, there's tracks for that. If it's a comedic scene, there's tracks for that. So yeah, I will say actually, on the topic of that, there are some tone shifts in this story which are sometimes baffling, and I don't know if they always landed. I think I have to go back and look through it with the knowledge about how everything played out in the ending to see whether I felt like those things were earned when everything's said and done. I think they probably are. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But it'll be like people are dying and it's all really serious. And then there's sort of throwaway gags thrown in and it just feels a bit weird. But in the whole scheme, like in the whole grand scheme of the story, I think it probably makes sense with everything. I'll leave it there. All right. Thanks.